Welcome back to our study of the Gospel of Mark. We are in chapter 9 today, lesson 5. I've entitled it Mountain and Valley. All right, so we're going to start on the mountain. Today we will be talking about the Transfiguration. Tradition has it that the Transfiguration was on Mount Tabor. It is a high mountain. But during the time of Jesus, there was a fortress on top of this mountain, which does present a bit of a problem because Jesus really wanted privacy for this transfiguration. Let me just show you where Mount Tabor is. All right, it is right here. And where did we leave Jesus and his disciples last week? They were up here in Caesarea Philippi, okay? And next, Mark tells us that we are going to have the Transfiguration. But it's a long way down here to Mount Tabor, isn't it? From here to here. Now, they could have walked it. Mark says that after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led him up the mountain. So in 6 days, they could have walked over here. But many scholars now believe that it occurred on Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is right here, just north of where we left them in chapter 8. It is a much higher mountain. You can see this is Mount Hermon, all the snow up there, much higher and more remote than Mount Tabor. He would have had plenty of privacy on this mountain. It's doubtful that they went all the way up the mountain. There's not always snow there, but there's always some snow. During the Transfiguration, it was probably in autumn. Your question number one is, who did Jesus take with him up the mountain? After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. All alone. It's very private. There he was transfigured before them. Now, your question 2, I asked you to describe Jesus in his transfigured state. Verse 3, his clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. All right, transfigure. This word transfigure means a change on the outside that comes from the inside. It's opposite from the word masquerade. Masquerade is taking something on the outside and covering the outside of the body to change it, okay? But this transfigure is coming from inside the body and changing the outside of the body. All right. Question 3, what 2 people appeared and talked with Jesus? Verse 4, and there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Now, Luke actually tells us what they were talking about. Luke 9, verse 31, they were talking about his departure. The word is Exodus, his Exodus, which he was about to bring to fulfillment in Jerusalem. Now, the disciples were hearing their conversation, Peter, James, and John, at least some of their conversation. But how did they know that it was Moses and Elijah? Now, God could have just let them know who they were, but they'd never seen them before, had they? But they were listening to their conversation. So maybe in the conversation they figured out, what? This is Moses. And this is Elijah. Where excited? You know, they have heard about Moses and Elijah their entire lives. And now they're seeing them. And they're hearing them talking with Jesus. Okay, pretty exciting stuff. Now, there are some people that when they get excited or when they get nervous, they just feel like they have to say something. They just chatter. Maybe this is the way Peter was. He does seem to, talk a lot, to add things when maybe he shouldn't. All right, so he blurts this out. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And Mark says in verse 6, he didn't know what to say. All of them were so frightened. This was another world. It was like another world they were seeing. This transfiguring, and Moses and Elijah. It was frightening. Okay? So, why the shelters? Why did he say that? Okay. There is a feast. It's called the Feast of Tabernacles. It's also the Feast of Booths that the Jews had. And it is always celebrated in autumn, the autumn of the year. Today they call it Sukkot, Sukkot. This was a feast that celebrated the promises of God. So all Jews everywhere still celebrate this beautiful feast of all the great promises of God. But the greatest promise, the most important promise that God promised them was a Messiah. This week, I found out, is the week of the Sukkot. In 2025, it began at sundown on October 6th, and the first day was October 7th. Now today's October 8th, so we are in the midst of Sukkot in 2025. So this was around the time of year that they are pretty sure that Jesus was transfigured. All right. Verse 7, then a cloud appeared and covered them. Matthew and Luke said when this cloud descended and surrounded them, it terrified the apostles. Now, what was this cloud? This was the Shekinah. The Shekinah, it was the symbol of God's presence in the Old Testament. In Exodus 40 verses 34 and 35, it talks about the Shekinah, the cloud of God's presence descending on the tabernacle in the midst of the Israelite camp. And Moses could not get close to the tabernacle because of this Shekinah, this cloud, the presence of God. And a voice came from the cloud. God is actually speaking to them. He's speaking to all of them, not just the 3 disciples. He's also speaking to Elijah and Moses. Question number 4. What did the voice from this cloud say? It said, "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." Now, I said before that the voice is speaking to the 3 disciples and Moses and Elijah. The voice is giving Jesus preeminence over the law and the prophets here. Moses was the lawgiver, the greatest man who ever lived as far as the Jews were concerned. and also Elijah, as far as the Jews were concerned, Elijah was the greatest prophet of all time. So they are here, and the voice is giving Jesus preeminence over the law and the prophets because he is the Son of God. Jesus tells them all to listen to Jesus. Hebrews 1 verses 1 and 2 says, in the past, God spoke through the prophets. Now he speaks through his Son. Jesus is going to explain some of this after the resurrection. Do you remember in Luke 24, there were two men that were walking along a road to Emmaus. And Jesus comes up to them, starts talking to them. He has been resurrected, but he's in an earthly body. And verse 27 says, and beginning with Moses and the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. So they learned a lot that day. And I want us to think back too to Mark 8, last lesson, lesson 4. Remember, Jesus was teaching about his death, and he and Peter had an altercation there when Peter was telling him not to talk like that. And this teaching had, when his disciples heard this teaching that he's going to die like a criminal, it was messing with their minds because they had delusions of grandeur. Okay, they were looking forward to this kingdom where they would be Jesus's special men, and they would receive glory as well as Jesus. So this teaching about his death, it not only frightened them, it shamed them. That was what a big part of the problem was. They were looking, instead of glory, they were looking at shame in their future. But now, these three disciples, they have seen the glory that surrounds Jesus, that came from inside of Jesus and surrounded them. They have beheld his glory. And they have been commanded by the very voice of God himself to listen to Jesus. Listen to his Son, because he knows what needs to be done. Listen to him. So, as they're talking together, are they thinking about something Jesus said in Mark 8? Remember verse 38 of chapter 8? Jesus said, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory. All right, verse 9. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. That was confusing. And you've got to understand, we know what it means because we're on this side of the resurrection. They were on that side of the resurrection. It was very confusing for them. So, they knew something was going to happen about a resurrection, but they really didn't understand it. But they knew it was important. So they're asking a question about Elijah now. Maybe this has something to do with that resurrection of the dead. Why, this is verse 11, why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? Elijah had died. And was he supposed to rise from the dead? Right, Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done everything to him that they wished, just as it is written about him. So they ask him about Elijah returning. They probably are thinking of Malachi 3 verse 1 and Malachi 4 verses 5 and 6. We studied about this in our first lesson, Mark 1. And so what does this question about the Son of Man have to do with Elijah? Okay. Jesus is probably referring here to Daniel 7, which talks about the Son of Man, and Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. They talk about the suffering of the Son of Man, of the servant. So the Son of Man is going to suffer. And Elijah, then he says Elijah has come. And basically, Elijah came first, and he suffered. Elijah has suffered. Now, who is he talking about? He's talking about John the Baptist, yes? All right. So he explains that Elijah, John the Baptist, had come and had lived a perilous life. He was plagued by this queen who was vindictive toward him. You remember, Elijah was plagued by a queen that was vindictive toward him, Jezebel. But Jesus wants them to focus on the Son of Man. He will suffer. Things are not always the way that you expect them to be, because we have earthly minds. And Jesus, things are not going to happen the way the disciples had always thought they would. And that happens with us too, right? Okay, verse 14. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. Now, your question 5, when they came back down the mountain, who did they find arguing with the other 9 disciples? So it was the teachers of the law. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. Now, there were 9 disciples that were left because Peter, James, and John had gone with Jesus. And these teachers of the law, some versions say scribes, were having this argument. And it undoubtedly had something to do with their lack of authority over this demon. So, verse 15, the people, it says they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. The people love a good argument, don't they? They love a good fight. So the people are listening to this argument between the disciples and the teachers of the law. You know, who's winning? And the disciples are flustered, of course. Jesus has given them power to drive out demons. But this demon is being difficult. And evidently these teachers of the law were ecstatic. Yeah, this is one time that we're going to win this argument, or we're going to win the day. But then somebody sees Jesus and the other 3 disciples coming toward them. and they get pretty excited. It's like, oh, look, it's Jesus. All right, so they're overwhelmed with wonder. It's amazing. Just when they need him to be there, he's there. He shows up. And it's like they come at the perfect time. It's like having a superhero arriving just in the nick of time. So they were pretty excited that Jesus was there because they knew when Jesus was there, things were really going to get exciting. And they did. Verse 16. What are you arguing with them about? He asks. So, who answers him? It was a man in the crowd. It so happens that he was the father of the son with the demon. And he explains the problem. Let's read. A man in the crowd answered, Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not. Okay, Jesus has come down the mountain, and he finds himself now in the valley of unfaithfulness. Isn't that what happens to us sometimes? We have a mountain peak experience. We're joyful. We feel great. And then almost immediately, like the next day, something happens that just plunges you into the valley. We have these highs and lows. Jesus finds himself in a low right here. Jesus said in verse 19, You unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Jesus seems very despondent here, doesn't he? So who's he talking about being unfaithful? I think he's talking about everybody there. The scribes were gleeful in their unbelief. They did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And they were gleeful about the fact that his disciples couldn't drive out this demon. The crowd was showing unfaithfulness. They were just there for the show. And they were being influenced by the scribes. Also, his disciples were at a loss as to why they couldn't drive out the demon. They had driven out all these other demons before, but not this one. So Jesus says, Bring the boy to me. Not that I am pairing a parent with Jesus, but when you're a parent, don't you sometimes just think, do I always have to do everything myself? Okay. Maybe not a parent. Maybe wherever you work. Whatever. So bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Now, demons, remember, are always afraid of Jesus because they know who he is, and they know what kind of power he has, and they know that his power is much greater than theirs. So when they brought the boy to Jesus, this demon went into action. So Jesus asks the boy's father, how long has he been like this? It's like he's investigating the powers of this demon. And he's questioning the father, maybe even to figure out why the disciples were unable to drive it out. So how long has he been like this? From childhood, the father answered. It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. This man, this father, was at his wit's end. Put yourself in this father's place. According to his answer to Jesus, this boy had been like this from childhood, not from infancy, but from childhood. So now he was either, just about to get into his teen years. He could have been a teen by then. It's doubtful he was a young adult, because I don't know that they would have called him a boy. But his father had dealt with this for quite a while. He's exhausted. His whole family probably is. So he evidently heard that the healer was close by. But even if he wasn't close by, he was willing to go wherever he had to find the healer. So he brought him. He was desperately hoping for a miracle. But when the disciples, and I'm sure he was excited and relieved to know that these disciples, they were totally willing to drive out this demon. But his hopes were dashed because none of them could drive this demon out. Even all together, all 9 of them, they could not drive out the demon. So now comes Jesus. The healer is actually here. But this man has probably had other exorcists try to drive out the demon. And by this time, he's had so many failures with this, so many disappointments, that he uses the phrase to Jesus, "if you can." I've often thought that Jesus said, "if you can," everything is possible for the one who believes. But I don't think he said it like that. Jesus was full of compassion for the hurting. And this man was in pain for his son. I believe he said it like, if you can, everything is possible for one who believes. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Jesus has the power. There is no denying it. We know he has the power. But the problem is lack of faith in those who ask to receive the blessings of that power. Blessings are obtained by faith. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. All right, it's possible Jesus may have wanted to talk to the man more. But he sees more people. There was already a crowd. Now he's seeing them come down from the hills. I don't know. But he immediately rebuked the evil spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." So he drives out this demon, and he adds a command that I don't believe I've seen in any other time whenever he drives out a demon. He tells this demon, "Do not ever enter him again." Verse 26, the spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." This demon seems very malicious and obstinate. Do you remember the legion of demons that Jesus drove out of the man in the Decapolis? All right, he begged Jesus to send him into the pigs. This one was different. He shrieked, convulsed the boy, and came out. And you wonder if the father thought he was dead too. I mean, that was, I'm sure, a scary moment for the dad, because so many people were saying, oh, he's dead. But what did Jesus do? Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. Luke says that they were all amazed at the greatness of God. In fact, the failure of the disciples actually emphasized the power of Jesus, didn't it? These 9 could not drive out the demon. And the demon was driven out by Jesus and told never to come back. 28. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, this kind can only come out by prayer. So I asked you, why couldn't they drive out the demon? Hadn't Jesus given them the power to drive out demons? Yes. But the answer Jesus gave to them indicates that a closeness to God is what enabled their power. Remember all the times that Jesus went up into the mountains or went to a solitary place? What was he doing by himself? He was going to commune with God, to be close to God. Jesus needed that. He didn't need it in order to be powerful. He needed it just because he needed that closeness of a father, of his father. And then last Sunday, Gary was talking about abiding in me and abiding in God. And it struck me that is why the disciples were unable to drive out that demon. They had not been in that closeness with their Father, with Jesus. Let's go to John 15, verses 7 and 8. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. Verse 30. Oh, let's do question number 7. Where did Jesus next take his disciples? They left that place and passed through Galilee. All right. So they were right up around here probably, and then they were going down into Galilee. Now from here on out, understand that Jesus has a mission. He is on his way south. He will continue going south because he is headed for Jerusalem. They left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. Here's a picture of the Galilean hills. I thought you might like to pretend you're there. He said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise." So his face is set toward Jerusalem. The end of his time on earth is growing near. His death is close, and he needs time to teach his disciples what they need to know. He doesn't want a big crowd to follow them. He needs privacy. Now, this teaching was done over a period of time. Verse 31 tells what he's teaching now. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. He will be delivered into the hands of men. Who's going to deliver him to the hands of men? One of his disciples is going to do it, although he doesn't say that. And who are these men who he'll be handed over to? Well, they are the rulers. The rulers of the temple authorities, the Sanhedrin. They will kill him. He's already talked about dying on a cross, taking up his cross. After 3 days, he will rise. What does that mean? Okay, this is confusing to them. Is he speaking in kingdom language? You remember how Jesus would speak in kingdom language when he was telling these parables. And the disciples would have to say, okay, what are you talking about? He will explain to them. Do you remember about the loaves? They couldn't understand the meaning of the loaves, and that frustrated Jesus. That was kingdom language. So this that he's talking about, is this like kingdom language, or is it literal? Verse 32, they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it. But really, is it surprising that they didn't understand what he meant? Remember, they're on that side of the resurrection. They're really having a hard time with this. But also remember, Jesus' face, it's toward Jerusalem. He is on his way. He's on a mission to get there and do what needs to be done. So I don't know if that had an effect on how he was acting, but whatever it was, the disciples were afraid to ask him about this in more detail. All right, now they're back. They came to Capernaum. This is a picture of my mom. This is my mom, Marion, and this is the gate into Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? Now remember, in Capernaum, he had a house, or he had his headquarters there. He would, it's the place he would go back to. So when Jesus came in, it says that they kept quiet. All right, Jesus goes in the house and they were quiet. Because, question 8, what were the apostles arguing about when Jesus came into the house? They were arguing about who was the greatest. Now, I don't know if it had something to do with the 3 that went up to the transfiguration. Now, Peter, James, and John had not told them what was going on, but it was obvious that these 3 were being chosen for some reason. Okay, so maybe they were talking about, oh, Peter's the greatest. No, John's the greatest. No, James is the greatest. Maybe they were taking sides. I just don't know. It just says they were arguing about who was the greatest. So sitting down, Jesus called the 12. This is significant because when a rabbi sits down and calls his followers to him, he's about to impart some really important teaching, which this definitely was. He said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. The disciples were expecting the Lion of Judah. Everybody was. The great lion that would roar through the Roman Empire and take over. And they would all reign at his side as great men. Men of standing, men of importance. But now, they're slowly realizing that the Lion of Judah was going to be the Lamb of God. The Lamb of God. And that's who they would serve alongside. That's what Jesus is saying here. No. If you want to be great, if you want to be first, you have to be the servant of everyone. And he took a little child and he placed this child among them. He took the child up into his arms and he says, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. So, does a child have any influence over anything? No. Is he able to, is a little child able to advance someone's career? No. In fact, a child is needy, isn't he? He's needy. He needs something all the time. You can't leave him alone. You got to take care of this child. And Jesus is telling them that in order to welcome God, the one who sent him, they must welcome the needy, not the powerfully influential. Jesus is talking about this upside down world. He wanted them to understand it's really topsy-turvy. Greatness comes from serving others. It's still that way today. Question 9, what question did John ask Jesus in verse 38? And it's not really a question. John just told Jesus what they had done. We saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop because he was not one of us. And Jesus said, do not stop him, Jesus said, for no one who does a miracle in my name can say in the next moment anything about me. Anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us. So what was happening here? John and the disciples evidently were being exclusive. Okay? They were claiming Jesus as their special teacher. And he was a prominent member of this group that was, one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. And they liked that. They liked being exclusive, just being them, and everybody else was not included. But Jesus is inclusive, isn't he? He's telling him, no, don't stop. Don't stop them just because he's not one of us. The name of Jesus was becoming famous all over the region. And it's likely some exorcists, and they had exorcists then, some exorcists probably sought to use his name when they were helping people. And so they were actually for Jesus, right? Who was against Jesus? The chief priests, teachers of the law, scribes, Herod. They were all looking to undermine him. So we can take a lesson from this exclusive and inclusive, can't we? Who are we to go out and teach and bring in to Jesus, to tell people about Jesus? It's people that don't know Jesus, right? It's the lost. How can we bring Christ to the lost if they see us arguing and bickering amongst ourselves and with other Christ followers? What does that look like? It doesn't look good, does it? And we need to focus on what we have in common with other Christ followers. And instead of arguing and dwelling on our differences, we need to be unified in Christ Jesus. Inclusive. Verse 41. Truly I tell you, anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name, because you belong to the Messiah, will certainly not lose their reward. Who belongs to the Messiah? Let's read this again. Anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name because you belong to the Messiah will certainly not lose their reward. Is he saying anyone who gives a cup of water to a disciple? No. He's saying to those who belong to the Messiah. Who belongs to the Messiah? Who did the Messiah create? Everyone. We all belong to the Messiah. So who might this be talking about? Anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name because you belong to the Messiah will certainly not lose their reward. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. Question 10, who is Jesus strongly cautioning in Mark 42 to 50? If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the sea. Okay, he is cautioning his disciples. He's teaching. He's talking also to those of us who are followers of Jesus. Why? Because we can all become exclusive, can't we? We all can do that. It would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck. This is a millstone. Now, millstones were, some of them were like maybe this big. Some of them that were like huge, big millstones. And what happened, it was a form of execution in those days. They would take a millstone, you notice it's got a hole in it. They would put a rope around someone, tie it on there, put the other end through this hole and tie it. They would tie the person's hands behind their back. They would take them out on a boat and they would throw the millstone in the water. And they would immediately hurtle to the bottom of the sea. Okay. That's just horrible. Frightening. But it's more frightening to think of what would be worse than drowning this way, isn't it? Verse 43, if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life maimed than with two hands to go into hell, where the fire never goes out. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life crippled than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It's better for you to enter the kingdom of God than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where the worms that eat them do not die and the fire is not quenched. This is just getting scarier and scarier. I'm sorry. Okay, but this is Jesus' teaching. Jesus talks of getting rid of the hand, the foot, the eye that causes us to sin. This is not to be taken literally, okay? This is an Eastern way of saying things. That in the East, they say things in like Proverbs. It's an Eastern way of saying that this goal is worth any sacrifice, or it's worth any sacrifice not to go to this hell, okay? These are human body parts we're talking about, and those are precious to us. Our hands are precious. They're our feet, our eyes. They're so precious to us, but they are often what we use when we stumble, what we do with our hands, where we urge our feet to take us, what we choose to look at, right? The disciples were human, weren't they? They desired human things, like glory. It's a very human thing. So Jesus is cautioning them and us that earthly desires like glory could lead only to an earthly end. What is the earthly end? It's where the worms that eat them do not die, and the fire is not quenched. That is your answer to question 11. How does Jesus describe hell? Hell is the earthly end. It's a place where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. I want to read Isaiah 66:24. And they will go out and look on the dead bodies of those who rebelled against me. The worms that eat them will not die. The fire that burns them will not be quenched, and they will be loathsome to all mankind. The word for hell here is Gehenna. Gehenna is it's a valley. It runs through the southwest corner of Old Jerusalem, outside the wall. And there were many references to it in the Bible, all of them bad. It had a very unclean past. They would sacrifice their children to Moloch. It was awful. But later on, because of its unclean past, it was made a place where they burned the garbage of the city. It smelled awful. There was always a fire burning there. These loathsome worms would feast on this refuse, and it was just awful. So anyway, we don't want to go there. Verse 49, everyone will be salted with fire. I checked commentaries on this, and some of them didn't even mention it. Some of them said this is one of the most difficult passages in the Bible. It's just hard to understand. And none of them agreed, and I thought, well, great. So I just decided to figure out my own interpretation. This is what I'm giving to you. First of all, I looked into fire. The Bible connects fire with purification and destruction. Salt adds flavor, and it's a preservative, and it purifies and cleanses other substances. It will not cleanse itself. So my conclusion about being salted with fire, the purification, preservative, cleansing, is that this is talking about, in verse 49, who is this talking about? Who is going to be salted with fire? Everyone. Everyone. The good, the bad. We will all be salted with fire. But this fire is a refiner's fire. You remember the song? God tests us throughout our lives. He tested David, didn't he? He tested Joseph. He tested Noah. He tested Adam and Eve. He tested the apostles. Everyone is tested. And it's in the testing that we are refined. We are cleansed. Okay? We go through the fire. Zechariah 13:9. I will refine them like silver and test them like gold. They will call on my name and I will answer them. I will say they are my people, and they will say the Lord is our God. Verse 50, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. A salt covenant in biblical times, and even in the East now, is an agreement that is meant to endure regardless of the circumstances. It is solid, it is unbreakable, it is everlasting. Now there is a Persian phrase, I cannot say it, so I'm going to tell you what it means. The translation is untrue to salt. Untrue to salt. It indicates disloyalty or ungratefulness. I don't know if it indicates a broken salt covenant, but it seems like a salt covenant cannot be broken. But this disloyalty or ungratefulness is what the phrase is talking about. So let's go back to the argument about who's the greatest. Here Jesus is telling the disciples to do something for him. To have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. They've been having this argument. Basically, Jesus is telling them, I've taught you all this, but I want you to have salt among yourselves. Don't talk about who's the greatest. You are all the same. Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. He's reminding them that they are the salt of the earth. They've got to be unified. They've got to be at peace. They had a message to take to the world, didn't they? It was a message like a salt covenant. This message that they will take will endure regardless of the circumstances. It is solid, it's unbreakable, and it's everlasting. I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, have salt among yourselves. Bye-bye now.